So this is my Husqvarna 435X auto mower. I've had this for about 2 full mowing seasons. I figured that would be a long enough time to really own this thing and really use it to give a fair take on what it's actually like to own. So I bought this mower in the beginning of the 2022 mowing season. It is now fall of 2023. So mowing season is almost up. And in 2 seasons I've had some good experiences and some bad experiences with the mower. So what are the good things? Well, the good things are it is fairly reliable. It almost never gets stuck. Because it's all-wheel drive, it'll go pretty much anywhere and not have any real issues. The only time it does get stuck is if it's like physically stuck on something. So for example, now that it's approaching fall, I have this hydrangea bush over here where the branches are starting to sag because it grows flowers, and the flowers have weight and it pulls the branches down, and the mower goes in there and sometimes it gets stuck in there. So okay, I'm going to pull it out, or maybe put a keep out zone around there on the GPS map. But you know, besides that, it practically never gets stuck. I've had some other issues where it would stop on the property because it has a false lifted error. That does happen sometimes, and that could be for one of 2 reasons. Either grass clippings are getting caught up in the joysticks that the body mounts onto, and that's preventing the joysticks from moving freely, and so the mower moves a little bit and something jostles around and it thinks it hit something and it backs up, and so it just stops. It stops running. So you got to just go in, clean that out, and it's usually fine. I've had false lifted errors for other reasons. I made a separate video about that, so I won't get into that here. But outside of that, this whole mowing season for 2023, I've hardly had to touch the auto mower. You know, I replaced the blades once, I think sometime early in the summer, and it's just because they get gunked up and dirty. It's been running ever since. It's been doing fine. So that's a good thing about the mower. The other good thing about the mower is also kind of a weakness, is that it uses boundary wire. This is one of the older style auto mowers where we have to set up a boundary wire around the entire property. Now that's both good and bad. The bad part is that it's a lot of setup work. You have to go around the entire perimeter and, you know, either staple the wire down or dig the little trenches and bury the wire. And I spent several seasons doing that for this whole property, because before that mower I had a Husqvarna 315X where I used the same exact boundary wire. So over time I would go around and bury certain sections of the wire that I was confident they were positioned in the right place and the mower was not likely to get stuck in those areas. Other areas like this over here that are more sloped, I had to keep the wire stapled in so that I can move it around if I need to. But now that I have the 435X, I can just put the wire right up, or not right up, but close to the retaining wall there, almost all the way down the property until I get to that tree, because it has to go around the tree. And that's fine. So once you set the boundary wire, you just have to go in each year at the beginning of the year and check the exposed areas where you have staples, because the frozen ground will lift the staples up, so you got to go in and tap those in. And maybe if you think you can bury it, okay, try to bury the wire. So it's good because, so the boundary wire is a lot of work as I've described it. And by the way, if it breaks, that's a whole separate problem of figuring out where it broke and where to fix it. But the advantage is in properties like this where you have tree coverage that would limit the mower's ability to communicate with a satellite, which would be the case for something like the Momotion Luba, the new auto mower that uses an RTK antenna, or even the new Husqvarna EPOS system, which communicates with an antenna and a satellite. You need good open sky for that. I have that here, but over there I don't, and over here I don't. I have shade and tree coverage everywhere. On properties like this, you're better off with a boundary wire system, because then you don't have to worry about any communication with a satellite other than, you know, to tell your phone roughly in the yard where your mower is if it gets stuck. So in that sense, it's good. So it's been fairly reliable. The boundary wire setup for this property works fine. Other good things about it, it cuts okay. I mean, I'm not too picky about having a perfect cut to the lawn. I don't care that it takes random paths to cut the lawn. You know, Husqvarna's reasoning for that is by doing random paths instead of rows. is that it makes the grass healthier because you're not cutting it in a particular direction each time. Okay, fine. I really don't care. I just want my grass cut. That's it. So it does that fine. Now, what are my complaints about it? I have a few. So the first complaint has to do with the mapping system. When you set up this mower, any X-based mower, it basically has to run around your yard for about 2 weeks to collect enough GPS data to put a map together of what your yard looks like. So that's 2 weeks of time where you can't really use the application, the software application, the way that you really would like to. In addition to that, if you have to go around and change where the boundary wire is, so say I have the boundary wire running around that little stump there, or say I take the boundary wire over here and it's up like this and I shift it back that way, or I move it in a little bit. Each one of those things would require you to remap the entire yard. You can't just tell the mower or the software, okay, this block here is different, go change that, but keep everything else the same, and then when you collect enough data over here, just add it to the existing map. That would be the smart way to do it. But some of the people that make these mowers are pretty freaking dumb, and they don't think about how to make something easier to use for the customer. So that's kind of disappointing that Husqvarna doesn't have more intelligent people designing more intelligent software to make it more user-friendly. So that sucks. And it's especially a problem if you are doing stuff like what I'm doing right now, where say I'm reseeding sections of the lawn that were destroyed by the mower. I'll get into that in a minute. And maybe you don't want it trampling over the yard, and maybe at the same time you did that, you also moved around some of the boundary wire. Then it becomes difficult because that boundary wire is physically in a different location. But if you're using your old map, the mower is not going to be able to exactly tell you exactly where it is. So I've had situations where the mower was physically over there, but based on what the GPS signal was telling me, it would tell me the mower is like over there, or maybe over there, because I moved the boundary wire just a little bit. So then when you try to put in keep out zones to keep it from running over some areas that you're trying to reseed, it doesn't recognize them as being where they're supposed to be. So it would be really nice if they could just do the correct job with their software so that you can only update the areas that need updating. That would be great. So that's one problem. The other problem, like I just mentioned a minute ago, is how the mower tends to destroy the yard. Why is that? Well, even though it's all-wheel drive, which does mean it can get itself up pretty much any hill, the problem is how it actually generates grip. So the tires themselves, actually let's go all the way back around and look at the tires. The tires have a lot to do with this. They are kind of knobby, spiky tires, and those tires dig into the ground, right? It's kind of like a typical, if you look at an RC car that has off-road tires, they might look a little bit like this. You got these little notches here, and those dig into the ground and give you traction. Now, the problem there is as they're digging into the ground, they're kind of grabbing onto the grass as it's pulling itself up the hill. And this thing has weight. It's not a featherweight mower. So as it's grabbing onto the grass, if the grass isn't heavily rooted, or even if it is, it's going to start pulling some of that grass out. And over time, what ends up happening is you just rip out all of the grass in that hilly section of the yard, especially if it goes around there a lot, and then you're just left with the exposed dirt. And that exposed dirt doesn't have any grass in it to shield it from erosion when it rains. And then when it rains, you lose that top layer of dirt, and you're left with this rocky crap, right? So then you got to go in and put new soil down and put new grass seed down, and wait a few weeks for that to grow back. But even a few weeks isn't enough time because the grass roots aren't deep enough. The mower's just going to kill it again. So there are sections of this property where I have that problem. You see there's a bit over here. This is actually some pipe that's under the ground. A bit over here, other random sections on this property here on the back, because this is very bumpy. But especially over here by this maple tree, there's a whole section that I just patched yesterday, because even though there was grass growing there earlier this year, and I had it looking really nice. The mower just trampled over it as it was going up and down this section to cut the grass, and it destroyed it. Same thing over here. Maybe a bit harder to see, but all of this here, it ruined all of this. It ruined this entire section here that used to have grass on it as of last summer, I would say, because the grass was new last spring. So it destroyed all of this. It left behind all this like rocky, underlying dirt here. So I have to reseed all of this and get some new grass in, right? Even over here, where it's not quite so hilly, but it starts to get hilly, it's still a little bumpy. So when the mower runs up against a surface, maybe the front of the bumper scrapes the surface, and that removes some of the grass and the dirt as well. So you end up with these like little steps in your slope sections of the yard, and it just looks really ugly. So this whole thing I'm gonna have to like redo over time. Now, it wasn't great even before I got the mower, but it's even worse now. So that's gonna take some work. So even though the auto mower is designed to be able to do really rough terrain and to go over, up and down steep hills, don't assume that just because it can do that, your grass will remain healthy in that region. It can end up tearing up the grass as it's climbing up and down those hills. So that's one frustrating thing about it. I spoke about the software, the GPS accuracy. I'd say that's mostly it. The only other thing would be the dealer experience, and I made a separate video about that. It really depends on what kind of dealer you have in your area. The one that I have in my area that does any work on automowers is not great. And because they're a dealer, they're going to assume the worst and assume that you have to buy the more expensive parts to repair your mower. So that's kind of just something to deal with. But as long as it doesn't break, it's fine. As long as you have a relatively smooth property, it's fine. This is a very bumpy property, so that makes things difficult. As long as you have strong grass, it's fine. Anything outside of that, you're going to run into some of these real-world problems. I have considered getting a Luba, despite the fact that I don't have really great sky access. I got a lot of trees everywhere, because a Luba has different tires, and I'm very curious to see if the different types of tires that the Luba has grip differently on the grass and maybe are a bit more passive to the lawn surface and don't do quite as much damage. But I'm kind of hoping that somebody else who already has a Luba can do a long-term review to speak to the effect of that mower on the actual quality of the grass over, say, 1 or 2 seasons. So I think that's about it as far as, the puts and takes for this model. Overall, it's good. I still use it, obviously. I kind of need to because I have a bunch of other stuff to do on the property. Oh, I got to clean that up. And I just don't have time to mow when I can do gardening or other things. So I kind of have to use it, and I have to accept how it beats things up a little bit on the lawn. Would I spend $4,000 on this, knowing that there are other options out there, like, for instance, the Luba, which doesn't require any boundary wire? Probably not. But that's a really hard question to answer because it really depends on the type of property you have. There are some cases where this is perfect for your property. My property is not a perfect property, so there's probably no perfect solution here. But it does the job. It's good enough. Okay, so that's kind of it for my 2 mowing season review. And if you have any other questions about this automower, by the way, please feel free to leave some comments. I'll answer them if I know the answer. And thanks for watching.